The meal after the goodbye. You're sitting at a funeral, listening to the pastor deliver the final words over someone you loved. You can hear people quietly crying. Somebody is holding a program in their lap. A child is asleep against their mother's shoulder. An older woman is holding a tissue against her face. And then the service ends. People stand. They hug. They whisper, "I'm praying for you. Call me if you need anything. We're here for you." But traditionally, there was another way people showed they were there. They cooked. After the burial or funeral service, family and friends would gather at a home, church fellowship hall, community center, or another gathering place. And food would appear. Sometimes the church organized it. Sometimes relatives cooked. Sometimes neighbors showed up carrying aluminum pans wrapped in foil. One person brought chicken. Another brought macaroni and cheese. Someone brought a vegetable. Someone brought dessert. And somebody always seemed to have enough food to feed 20 more people than expected. It wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. It was comforting. Because grief makes simple things difficult. Cooking can feel impossible. Going grocery shopping can feel exhausting. Trying to decide what everybody is going to eat can feel like one more burden. So the meal became part of the comfort. Kayla understood that because she grew up around people who believed that feeding somebody was one of the highest forms of love. But as she got older, she started noticing something different. What happened to the food? Kayla first noticed it at a funeral she attended one Saturday afternoon. The funeral was beautiful. The church was packed. The choir sounded incredible. The pastor delivered a powerful message. Family members shared memories. Everyone came together to honor the person who had passed. But after the service, there wasn't much of a meal. There were a few sandwiches, some chips, a couple of bottles of water, and a small tray of cookies. Kayla looked around. There were elderly relatives, children, people who had traveled from out of town, people who had been at the funeral for hours. And Kayla thought, this family has just buried somebody they love, and now they're supposed to figure out dinner? She didn't judge the church. She understood that churches had budgets. She understood that volunteers were stretched thin. She understood that families were struggling financially. And she understood that times had changed. But something kept bothering her, because she remembered the way things used to be. The big pans of food, the church ladies cooking all night, the neighbors bringing desserts, the fellowship hall filled with the smell of home cooking. And she realized something. The tradition wasn't necessarily gone because people didn't care. Sometimes people simply didn't have the time, money, energy, or resources anymore. And that's when an idea started forming in Kayla's mind. At first, it wasn't even a business idea. It was just a thought. What if somebody handled this? What if families could call one company and that company would take care of the food? What if churches could recommend a catering company to families? What if funeral homes had a trusted vendor they could call? What if the family didn't have to worry about cooking? What if the meal could simply show up? Kayla couldn't stop thinking about it. At first, Kayla thought, surely somebody is already doing this. She started researching. She searched funeral catering, Repass Catering, funeral luncheon catering, church funeral meals, bereavement catering. She found restaurants that catered. She found traditional catering companies. She found banquet halls. But Kayla noticed something. Very few businesses were building their entire identity around repass and bereavement catering. And that caught her attention. Because she wasn't trying to create another generic catering company, she wanted to create something different. She wanted families to know exactly what her company was for. Comfort food for difficult days. She wanted the business to feel warm, professional, respectful, affordable, and dependable. She wanted funeral directors and churches to know, if you call Kayla, the food is going to be handled. So she created a name. She designed a simple logo. She created a menu. And she started with the foods she knew people wanted. Fried chicken, baked chicken, macaroni and cheese, green beans, mashed potatoes, rice, cornbread, salads, dinner rolls, desserts, sweet tea, lemonade. She also created packages: small family repass, medium gathering, large repass, and eventually custom packages. She wasn't trying to sell luxury cuisine. She was selling something much more important: reliability. Kayla's first repast. Her first real opportunity came from someone she knew at church. A family had lost a loved one. The family was overwhelmed. Someone mentioned that Kayla had started offering catering. The family called. They needed food for about 40 people. Kayla wrote everything down: date, time, location, number of guests, menu, delivery instructions, special requests. She quoted the price, and then she hung up the phone. Her heart started racing, because this wasn't a family dinner anymore. This was a business. 40 people were counting on her. And there was something else. This wasn't a birthday party. This wasn't a graduation. This wasn't a wedding. People were grieving. Kayla knew she couldn't afford mistakes. She arrived at the kitchen early, way before she needed to. She prepared everything carefully. She labeled the pans, checked temperatures, packed serving utensils, napkins, plates, cups, condiments, desserts, drinks, everything. Then she loaded the vehicle and drove to the church. When she walked into the fellowship hall, the family was already there. They looked exhausted. Some were crying. Some were sitting quietly. Some were talking about memories. Kayla didn't walk in acting like she was just dropping off catering. She walked in understanding what the day meant. She quietly set everything up. And then something happened. An older woman walked over to her. She looked at the food, then looked at Kayla and said, "Baby, thank you." 2 words. That's all she said. But Kayla felt them, because she realized this wasn't really about chicken. It wasn't about macaroni. It wasn't about making money. The food was simply the vehicle. The real product was relief. The funeral director. After that first job, Kayla realized she needed customers, and she knew exactly where to find them. Funeral homes. She started making a list of funeral homes in her area. Then she created a professional catering packet. It included her menu, pricing, repass packages, delivery information, setup options, contact information, business insurance information, food safety credentials where applicable, and pictures of her food. Then Kayla started making phone calls. Some people said no. Some said, "We already have a caterer." Others said, Our families usually handle the food themselves." Some never called her back, but Kayla kept going. She wasn't discouraged. She understood something about business. No doesn't mean never. Sometimes it just means not yet. Then one funeral director finally gave her a chance. They needed a repast catered. The family wanted comfort food. The funeral director called Kayla. She delivered. And once again, she handled everything. The funeral director noticed. She was on time, professional, quiet, respectful. The food was organized. The family didn't have to worry. A few weeks later, the phone rang again. Another family, another repass, another opportunity. And suddenly, Kayla wasn't chasing customers anymore. The referrals were starting to chase her. The church partnerships. Kayla didn't stop with funeral homes. She started approaching churches. She understood that churches had always played an important role in caring for families during times of grief. But pastors and church administrators had a lot on their plates. Funerals already required coordination: music, programs, ushers, parking, hospitality, family support, and sometimes food. Kayla offered a solution. She told churches, "You don't have to cook. You don't have to ask volunteers to spend the night in the kitchen. You don't have to worry about whether there's enough food. Call us." She created church partnership packages. Some churches referred families directly to her. Others kept her information on a preferred vendor list. Some families paid directly. Some arrangements were coordinated through the church. And Kayla became known for one thing. When the family needed a meal, Kayla showed up. The business starts growing. At first, Kayla was doing everything herself. She answered the phone, she took orders, she shopped, she cooked, she packed, she delivered, she set up, she cleaned, and then she went home exhausted. But she wasn't complaining, because she could see something forming. What started as one meal became 2, then 3, then 5, then 10. She started getting calls from funeral homes she had never visited. How? Referrals. A funeral director recommended her. A church recommended her. A family member recommended her. Someone posted a picture of the food. Someone else saved her number. And slowly, Kayla's little catering business became a real company. She hired someone to help with preparation, then another person. Eventually, she had a small team. She found a commercial kitchen. She bought better equipment. She created standardized recipes. She created prep lists. She developed contracts. She created invoices. She opened a business bank account. And she stopped thinking like someone who was simply selling food. She started thinking like a CEO. Kayla discovers the numbers. One night, Kayla sat at her kitchen table with a calculator. She had been so focused on helping people that she hadn't really stopped to examine the numbers. She looked at her average order, then her food costs, labor, packaging, delivery, kitchen expenses, insurance, supplies, and profit. She realized something. If she could increase her average order without sacrificing quality, the business could become extremely profitable. So she began offering additional services: dessert trays, beverage stations, coffee service, additional sides, table setup, disposable dinnerware, servers, cleanup, and customized menus. She wasn't forcing people to buy things they didn't need. She was simply creating options, because every family was different. A small family might need food for 25 people. Another family might need food for 150. Another might need food for 300. Kayla built a system that could handle all of them. The hardest day. Then came the funeral that changed everything. Kayla received a call from a funeral home. The family had lost a beloved grandmother. She had been the center of the family. The funeral was expected to bring in a large crowd. Kayla was asked to cater the repass. When she arrived, she could immediately feel the difference. This family was devastated. The grandmother had raised children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. She had been the person everyone called, the person who cooked, the person who prayed, the person who kept everybody together. And now, she was gone. Kayla and her team prepared the meal. They set everything up, and as people came through the line, Kayla watched them. Some cried, some laughed while remembering stories. Some talked about the grandmother's cooking. Someone said, "She would have loved this." And that's when Kayla realized something. Food wasn't just filling people's stomachs. It was helping them remember. Food was creating a familiar moment inside an unfamiliar day. For a few minutes, people weren't thinking about paperwork. They weren't thinking about the cemetery. They weren't thinking about the final goodbye. They were sitting together, eating, talking, remembering, and healing. From side hustle to company. Eventually, Kayla's business became too large for her to operate casually. She created systems: a booking system, a customer intake form, a catering checklist, a kitchen prep schedule, a delivery schedule, a staff training guide, a vendor list, a pricing calculator. She trained employees to understand something important. They weren't simply delivering food. They were entering people's most difficult moments. So professionalism mattered. How they spoke mattered. How they dressed mattered. How they handled the food mattered. How they treated the family mattered. Kayla created a company culture around compassion. She told her employees, "We don't show up loud. We don't make the day about us." The business that grew from grief. Years earlier, Kayla had been sitting at a funeral wondering, what happened to the meal? Now, funeral homes were calling her. Churches were calling her. Families were calling her. She had built relationships with local venues. She had a commercial kitchen. She had employees. She had recurring referrals. She had systems. And most importantly, she had built trust. Her business wasn't successful because she found some secret recipe. It wasn't successful because she had millions of dollars to invest. It wasn't successful because she had thousands of followers on social media. It succeeded because she found a problem and solved it. She saw families who needed food. She saw churches that needed support. She saw funeral homes that needed dependable vendors. And she created the bridge between them. Years after Kayla started her business, she returned to the church where she had catered her very first repass. She stood in the fellowship hall. The room looked different. The business had grown, her team was larger, her menus were more sophisticated. Her company was generating serious revenue. But Kayla hadn't forgotten where it started. She remembered that first plate, that first phone call, that first nervous delivery, that woman who looked at her and said, "Baby, thank you." Kayla smiled because she finally understood. She didn't build a catering business because she wanted to sell food. She built it because she understood something many people forget. Sometimes the smallest act of service can carry somebody through the hardest day of their life. A hot meal, a full plate, a cup of sweet tea, a piece of cake, a table surrounded by family. Those things may seem small, but during grief, they can mean everything. Kayla's story is really about entrepreneurship, but it's also about paying attention. She didn't invent grief. She didn't invent funerals. She didn't invent church meals. She simply noticed that something people had depended on for generations was becoming harder to provide. And instead of complaining about it, she created a solution. That's entrepreneurship. Sometimes the best business ideas aren't complicated. They're sitting right in front of you. A problem, a need, a community, and a person willing to serve. Kayla turned one simple question, who's going to feed the family, into a business, and that business became more than a source of income. If you enjoyed Kayla's story and you love stories about food, family, faith, entrepreneurship, and turning simple ideas into something meaningful, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who would enjoy it, and subscribe to the channel